Okay, so in this video we will be learning about mechanism of urine concentration. So we know that the blood osmolarity is around 290 milliosmol per liter. We can consider it around 300 for ease of understanding. Now, why do we need to concentrate blood? Suppose there are two persons. If one drinks more water, then his body fluids get hypoosmolar. Body wants to maintain its osmolarity at a constant level, and if a person drinks more water, the fluid gets hypoosmolar, and kidney excretes around 600 milliosmol of solute, a waste solute. This is a 600 milliosmol is a waste solute generated by a average 70 kg person. Okay, so this is what kidney work on to excrete this amount of solute into the urine. So if a person drinks more water, then the osmolarity is disturbed, and to regain the similar osmolarity, body has to lose water. So the urine produced is more diluted and more volume of urine is produced. And if there is a person who is in desert, who is already losing his fluid through sweat and respiration, then his fluid gets and he is unable to consume anything, any water or something, then his fluid gets hyperosmolar. And to avoid more high osmolarity, like to regain back the osmolarity, or to avoid more hyperosmolar conditions, it has to retain its fluid, right? If it loses more of its water, it might get again more hyperosmolar. So to retain its water, kidney produces small volume of concentrated urine. Okay, so how is it produced? So mechanism includes, there are two mechanisms. The first one is hyperosmolar renal medullary interstitium is made. It is also known as corticopapillary osmolar gradient. So we know that this is cortex, and this is outer medulla, inner medulla, and then papilla. So there is the hyperosmolar gradient. Hyperosmolarity is produced. And how MIH is produced? It is produced by two ways. Loop of Henle has a counter current multiplier and urea recycling in renal medulla. These two processes are responsible for producing medullary interstitium hyperosmolarity, and it has to be maintained, otherwise it will be washed out. It is done by the vasorector, which is a counter current exchanger. Okay, and there is another role of ADH. So ADH, so basically these two things are responsible for concentration and dilution of urine. Well, so we know that. Now let's see how this counter current multiplier works. So now you're gonna study the exact process of creating MIH and how it is made. Okay, so first of all, let us consider if the first of all we need to know important point about thick part of thick part of ascending lobe of Henle. Okay, so firstly consider this nephron working for the very first time. So 300 milliosmol per liter of plasma is filtered. This is a fluid collected here, tubular filter of 300 milliosmol per liter. Now equal amount of water and all solutes and water are absorbed. So 300 is a similar osmolarity is left at the end of PCT. Now the same osmolarity of fluid is moving around in the loop of Henle. When it reaches to this thick part, what happens is, and there is a normal if this nephron is supposed to be working for the first time, obviously there will be no medullary MIH, right? So basically it was 0. Okay, so now this is the first time this fluid has reached here with the 300 milliosmol per liter. Now what's gonna happen is, basically there is a key channel called sodium potassium 2 chloride transporter. To know further more details, you can refer to the previous videos. And what happens is, this will absorb solutes, right? Because this part of nephron is impermeable to water, and it is permeable to solutes, so the solutes are absorbed and released into the interstitium. And we know we have a sodium potassium ADPase here, which takes out the sodium out, making cell sodium poor, which favors absorption of sodium. And then the sodium is potassium chloride, everything. This potassium and chloride are co-transported with the sodium, and they're all taken up into the interstitium, making interstitium concentrated. So here's the fact that is very much important to know is that whatever the concentration gradient that can be created by this master channel across the tubular cells between this tubular fluid and this interstitium is difference of 200. Okay, so here basically the fluid that we're getting here is, suppose the fluid here has a osmolarity of 200, then it will create it if a fluid that has entered here is around 300, right? So it basically takes up the solutes from this fluid and create a hyperosmolar condition of 400 and making this luminal fluid hypoosmolar by absorbing solutes and taking it up till 200. So now you can see the difference, the gradient between is of 200, right? So that was very much important to know that proximal part lose water and provide more hyperosmolar fluid to ascending limb of loop of Henle, and descending limb of loop of Henle makes gradient of 200 difference. So basically, so maximum osmolar difference can be created is of 200. Okay, so proximal part, all the part, what happens is basically if we had a nephron as a straight tube, then it could only create a difference of 200, right? So we cannot achieve such a high medullary interstitium concentration. So for that reason, nature has, okay, so for that reason, nephrons have been curved like this by God, so that it can be able to create a hyperosmolar condition of around 1200 in the medullary interstitium. So what happens is this part of loop of Henle, oh, I got erased, no problem. Alright, it doesn't look like nephron. Alright, this is, so what happens basically is this part of nephron is made as such that it loses out water. So when it loses out water, it provides more concentrated solution here, and then this part of nephron can work and create a gradient of 200 and can create more concentration in this interstitium. Okay, so basically what happens is the fluid frequently is getting concentrated every time it moves forward. Suppose it is 300 now, and it creates a gradient of 400 and 200, right? Now as it moves down after some time, due to the interstitium hyperosmolarity, it loses water, and the concentration of fluid here becomes even more higher at around 400. Now this get a chance to create again difference of 200, making 600 as in hyperosmolar fluid. Okay, now we're gonna understand this part in more detail further. Now let's look at this. So firstly, 300 milliosmol is filtered and equal amount is reabsorbed. The 300 is present at the end of PCT as equal solute and solvent has been reabsorbed. So we are considering here like that the nephron is working for the very first time, and 300 milliosmol has been filtered, and there is 300 milliosmol per liter at the end of PCT. Now when the first time the nephrons job start, cells in thick part loop of Henle, they have the sodium potassium ATPases and these transporters, which will take up all these ions and make the interstitium hyperosmolar. Okay, by the similar mechanism which I've already discussed. So this part of nephron makes interstitial fluid concentrated, and the lumen fluid present inside as dilated. And what happens that interstitium becomes 400 across. Now again the same thing, if nephron would have been straight, then only this much of concentration gradient would have been produced. But nephron is bent like this by God, so that every time now more concentration gradient can be created. Now again a new fluid filtered of 300. Here what happens while moving down, it finds interstitium of 400 or across. Now it started losing water, as it is interstitium is hyperosmolar, and it loses water and becomes 400, equal to that of interstitium. Now this 400 fluid reaches to the thick part of loop of Henle, and where these cells again work on this fluid, creating a gradient of 200, right? And they make the interstitium 600. Okay, because the interstitial fluid is of 400, they work more and they make the interstitium of 600, right? Now we have an interstitium of 600. Again a new fluid has been filtered, which is of 300, and then while reaching down it finds the interstitium is of 600. Now this part again loses water. It loses water again to make its osmolarity equal to that of interstitium, which is 600. Now the 600 fluid again reaches to the thick part, where again this thick part cells work on this, making a gradient of 600. And if the fluid reaches here is of 600, they can work enough and take up the solutes into the interstitium, making interstitium of 800, right, which is 200 more than the luminal fluid. Now the interstitium concentration gets 200. Now the interstitium gets an osmolarity of 800, sorry, and this 800 again the fluid enters. The same process keep on occurring until the osmolarity reaches till 1200. Now finally the cycle repeats until a 1200 milliosmol per liter is interstitium concentration created. All right, so what happens then, the fluid which is present here is very much and just for information, that this part is water impermeable. This green color part is this part is water permeable, and this green color part is water impermeable, and this part is dependent on ADH. Alright, so what happens basically is the solutes are removed from this part, so this part reaches a diluted fluid as solutes have been removed, and water cannot escape with fluids as it is water impermeable. So this diluted part, again here in the early part of pticity, there are cells like sodium chloride transporter. They will take up more solutes and they make this area even more, they make this fluid even more diluted, which is of somewhere around 60 milliosmol per liter. And now the main question comes, why is this gradient created, right? So cortical area has a very high blood flow, so the solutes that have been concentrated are washed away by the blood flow, and medullary area has less blood flow, so the solutes are not easily washed away. So that's the reason for development of gradient in the medullary interstitium. Now let's look down towards what is urea cycling.